By 1991, Square had already made a name for itself with the Final Fantasy series. They wanted to make an action RPG similar to The Legend of Zelda. Square at the time had a young developer named Koishi Iishi who had wanted to make a game called Seiken Densetsu. After initially being turned down in 1987, he was given the green light to make his game in 1991, and the Mana series was born. Ishii went on to develop or have a hand in 10 more games under the Mana moniker. He was later the director of Final Fantasy XI and its first expansion, which explains a lot. I personally love the Mana series. They're all flawed, but they're extremely unique. They're home to some of the best art and music in all of gaming, in my opinion. I also love the collection on Switch. I thought it was a great return to form. I'd love to see a second collection, to be honest. If we had a second collection with the original Adventures, Legend, maybe Sword for some multiplayer, children, online, local multiplayer, then I think we would have every game worth getting. Adventure of Mana, 1991, black and white Game Boy. Originally a Final Fantasy spin-off, originally called Seiken Densetsu Final Fantasy Gaiden in Japan. Directly it means Legend of the Holy Sword, Final Fantasy Side Story. Why it was called Final Fantasy Adventure in the US is only to tie it into the Final Fantasy series. It was called Mystic Quest in Europe. Square wanted to take Final Fantasy and Zelda and blend them. It's a simple black and white Game Boy game, but the sprites are nice and crisp and clean. It's got a good art style. It's great for portable gaming. The combat is simple, but the depth is from the different weapons, from the magic, and the fact that you can customize your stats when leveling up. The world is semi-open. It opens up in chunks, but you have a lot to explore right off the bat, and every time you get a major movement ability, you have much more of the world to explore, like when you get a chocobo and then the robot chocobo. Choosing stats at level up allows for more customization of your character, which is great. It is sometimes a bit too limited, but the game's short, so it's okay. There is some optional content, and it can be sequence broke because the game opens up very fast. The OST, for the time, especially on the Game Boy, is great. There's a lot of FF references, seeing how this is the first one that's really a spin-off. There's chocobos, red mages, black mages, white mages, and even magus mages, the upgraded black mage from Final Fantasy III. I love the bosses and the monsters and the pace of the overall combat. The dungeons are very much mazes and have some light puzzles, which won't be seen much more in the rest of the series. The story's lame, it sometimes gets in the way, and sometimes the stiff, just four-directional movement can be a bit awkward, but it's forgivable since it's on the Game Boy. The status effects and monsters can be a bit cheap, and you can die really quickly in this game. Overall, I think it's a great game. It takes Zelda 1 and Final Fantasy 1 through 3 and combines them. I actually think I like this game a little more than all the games it's borrowing from. Like if I had to play Final Fantasy 1, 2, 3, Legend of Zelda or this, I think I would pick this. I think this is the most overlooked and underrated game in the entire Mana series. Secret of Mana, 1993, SNES. What can I say about this game that hasn't been said? Combat is some of the best in the series, seeing how so fast and precise it is. It takes the weapon system from Adventure and adds an upgrade system to it. Weapons are more fun to control, and when you level up, you get more charge attacks per weapon. They take longer to charge up per level, but it technically adds more variety to the combat. You can no longer choose a stat when you level up, which is a little bit disappointing, making leveling up a little bit more linear. Weapon switching is much faster thanks to the new ring system, although it does take a little bit of getting used to. There's more buttons to the controller, but the game doesn't use them too well. For example, the shoulder buttons, to my knowledge, don't do anything. Maybe it could have been used for character switching, something faster rather than the select button. The art, music, and presentation for the Super Nintendo are just mind-blowing. The graphics are great, and the game world is so colorful, and there's such good animations. There's an awkward stamina system to the combat where you swing and then have to wait for your character to recharge stamina to swing again. And if you swing at 100% stamina, you do full damage. Anything less than that, you do less. But anything less than 100 literally does nothing. There's no point in trying to swing at 20, 50, 70, 80. It's just swing at 100 or don't swing at all. I get what they were kind of going for, but I don't think it works. The three characters, with having multiple different weapons, makes better puzzles and better world environment, because instead of having to constantly go in the menu and switch weapons, you can keep 2 or 3 weapons that are going to be used a lot for the out-of-combat puzzles, like the whip for traversing over gaps or the axe for cutting down stumps and trees in your way, and just swap out characters real fast. It makes traversing the world a little bit better. Aside from the weapons integrating with the world for puzzles, most puzzles are just kind of gone, which is a bit of a letdown. But the magic and the combat is such an improvement over the first one and more fleshed out, it really makes up for it. Although magic is way too easy to rely on, you can sort of just lock enemies in place later on in the game by just spamming magic. Also, the main boy, Randy, not getting any sort of magic
is the biggest load of shit.
Overall, it's an amazing game. The multiplayer is great for an action RPG and boosts it to superstardom height on the Super Nintendo. The controls are smooth and great, but the AI on your teammates is kind of bad. It had a remake for mobile in 2018 and then eventually got ported to the PC and consoles, but it's fucking awful. Please don't play it. Senkin Densetsu 3, 1995, Super Famicom. I'm not calling this Trials. I like the combat of Adventure and Secret better than this one, but this is still good. Adventure was more straightforward, Secret was more action-based. This game's more RPG, but the combat feels a little bit stiff. I do like how when you level up, you get to choose a point again for your characters, so they're bringing that back from Adventure, and it allows for a lot more customization. I also love the class system where each character has multiple classes you have to choose from, which gives you a lot of replay value and a lot of choices in how you role play your character. The story's also not bad, especially with the 6 characters and having to play through multiple times to see different aspects. It's not told the best, the translation's not the best, it still gets in the way, I think, but it's not bad. I love how there's 6 characters and you can only choose 3. You'll interact with the other 3 characters throughout the game a little bit. You'll see them in town and you'll do a little bit with their story as you eventually visit their starting areas, but you'll have to play through it multiple times if you'd like to see every final boss and every story to its conclusion. I think I'm gonna get killed for saying this, but I think I prefer almost everything about the last 2 games over this one. This game is gorgeous, better looking than the first 2 Senkin Densetsus, but I like the color of Secret of Mana better. It's like the vibrant colors and animations just pop. The music in this game though is great. It doesn't have anything on Secret, but what does? Legend of Mana, 1999, PlayStation. The best Mana game, there is no competition, this is the one. The open game structure lets you choose the map layout, the terrain of your world. It's got almost a city building aspect to it. Completing story quests unlocks artifacts, which are then placed on the map. This affects the look and the feel and even the stats of the world. Every artifact, and by proxy every location on the map you place, have elemental and stat properties. The farther away from the home base that the places are put, the higher level they are. The elements of each area also affect the nearby areas, meaning the kind of puzzle-like layout to your world actually affects things. There's a lot of quests, a lot of areas, and a lot of story that can be missed. It's extremely open-ended. You can tackle almost any mission in any order. So it doesn't really necessarily have a central narrative. It has a lot of small stories that tie into each other to just kind of build a big lore-filled world. The combat is like a perfect combination of everything up to this point. The action is better with more types of attacks, skills outside of combat besides just swinging and moving. You have the shoulder buttons for your special attacks. You have tons of weapons, tons of special moves per weapon. You can mix and match music, skills, attacks. It's fantastic. The system is streamlined too. Even though it has more, it feels like it's easier to get a hang of because it feels like it's simplified in the menus. Magic is less useful and you have to craft instruments and then it's charged, but it makes it a lot less overpowered. If the magic had a little bit of a buff, it'd be perfect, but I still think it's better than the other Mana games just because it's not just insanely overpowered like it was previously. The home base eventually unlocks your ability to customize armor, partners, monsters, magic instruments for casting spells, and the crafting system is so stupidly deep that 20 plus years later people are still figuring things out about it. The game is absolutely gorgeous. This is the best looking game in the series, hands down. I think the best looking game on the PlayStation 1, one of the best looking games of all time. Sword of Mana, 2003, Game Boy Advance. This is the first reimagining of Final Fantasy Adventure. It's another step up in art, story, graphics, and presentation compared to the last ones. The OST is amazing. It takes those perfect tunes from the first one, but makes them more complex. I would say the soundtrack's almost as good as Secret of Mana's. The combat is also fantastic. Combines the action of Secret and Adventure, and it's not quite as good as Legend, but it's a lot better than the games that came before it for the most part. Finally, you can run in and out of combat, and holy shit, what an amazing thing. No more stamina, more combos, combining weapons and magic. What's not to love? Levels up don't let you put stats, but you pick a combat style, and then each combat style upon a level up increases certain stats, and then once you've put combat points into certain class styles enough, you'll gain a class, which will greatly improve your stats and boost special abilities. It's a lot like the combination of Adventure and Seiken Densetsu's system, more organic. However, it's not explained very well, so it's incredibly confusing. You're going to need to look up a guide, otherwise you have no idea what you're doing. But if that doesn't bother you, then this game has a ton of depth to how you build your characters. Crafting is borrowed from Legend of Mana, and it's great, but it's super obtuse and poorly explained, just like in Legends. But this is such a smaller game, I don't think it really needed the craft system. It is fun, but ultimately pointless. It's a great game with a great story, but there's too many cutscenes. It really kills the pace in the first few hours. Because this is a remake of Final Fantasy Adventure, but it's a different take on the story. It has the fewest faults and the most strengths, I think, up to this point in the series. Dawn of Mana, 2006, PlayStation 2. This is a 3D action-adventure game, pretty much the last Mana game. I believe in Japan, this was Seiken Densetsu 5, the last numbered one. Any other games in the series beyond this are purely remakes or spin-offs. Combat is a mix of swordplay, magic, and using a whip system to swing and interact with objects, seeing how it has a light physics engine. Combat is stiff, but the game runs really smoothly on PS2. It's 60 frames, it's really pretty. For a PlayStation 2, this game is absolutely gorgeous. This might be one of the best looking games on the PlayStation 2. I like the RPG damage finally showing on the screen because it is an action RPG. Having health bars on screen, it helps with a lot. The mini-map is completely worthless though. The camera's far too zoomed in. It makes it really hard to do the platforming and really hard to see anything in combat. There's a lock-on system and it's fine, but it's not perfect. I feel like if this game just took the combat and camera of Kingdom Hearts 1, you would probably have the best game on the PS2. The dialogue is still kind of bad, but the story's presented well, but the combat is so stiff and the grinding system is so bad because you lose all your level ups every time you finish a chapter, and it takes so long to level up because you only get experience points when you kill a monster while they're panicked. To panic a monster, you have to hit them with the environment or a certain type of spell, and then kill them while they're still weakened from that. So every area becomes new story area, watch cutscenes, go grind. Hopefully you have enough items to cast the spells you need, because instead of mana, the spells are charge based. Then level up, then go actually do like the dungeon and story. It becomes super repetitive, and with the awful combat, it kind of bogs the whole game down. This is a really interesting game, and especially the presentation, graphics, music. If it just had a good combat system, this game would be amazing. Children of Mana, 2006, Nintendo DS. This is really the first spin-off game. There is a hub where you shop, craft, collect missions, select dungeons, do story stuff. It is essentially a multiplayer action RPG dungeon crawler. There is a single player story, and you can play it single player, but it's missing a lot of the fun by not playing multiplayer. It has a system where you have gems, and you equip gems Diablo style into your character, but it has the attach case system like Resident Evil 4, where gems have different sizes and shapes, and you kind of get a little bit of a puzzle of picking which ones you want and making them fit together. It's kind of fun. Each of the 4 characters you can choose from have different stats, different strengths, and weaknesses. Since there's 4 characters and they all play completely differently and have different weapons, strengths, and abilities, playing multiplayer, you're really going to get to see the depth of the combat that you just can't experience single player. It has a system where, as you hit, you build up a special bar. Where instead of in the other games where you build up a special bar to use your special attack, in this game, you build it up and enter a Fury mode. When you're in Fury mode, all your attacks and magic attacks become like special attacks. and it just lasts for a time rather than just firing off an attack and going away. Every time you finish a mission, you get a rank. Your rank is based on your time, your damage, your items, all kinds of things. The background art and the portraits are gorgeous for the Nintendo DS. The character and the sprites are okay, but noticeably lower resolution kind of makes them stand out. Music is fine, not nearly as good as any of the other Mana games. I think this is a good multiplayer game, but single player it's kind of meh. Friends of Mana, mobile only, Japan, 2006. I couldn't find any footage of this game, just screenshots. This was some mobile phone game that was only released in Japan. It's since been taken off their online stores and it's not online anymore from what I understand. It's supposed to be a story prequel to Legends of Mana? I have no information on this thing. If anyone knows anything about this game, let me know. Heroes of Mana, Nintendo DS, 2007. This was an RTS for the DS with touch controls. And I understand what they were going for. The DS was the perfect system to do little touch mini games and seemed like a perfect fit for tactical RTS style game. And it just doesn't look like a Mana game because of that. It's okay looking, but it's not quite Mana. It's also very unintuitive. It took me a really long time to figure out how you tap on characters and circle them and move them around. It's a little awkward to play. It's extremely easy, except for the awkward controls. It's really hard for a beginner to get into this game. I would honestly say please don't play this. This is the worst game in the series. Circle of Mana, mobile only, Japan, 2013. A mobile phone card game only released in Japan. It's all about collecting cards and battling the AI. There is a PvP section called the Coliseum, but it was so separate from the main game, you're meant to really collect and trade and then just battle NPCs. Very little information also I could find on that. I have no idea if this game is still going and you can still play it. Rise of Mana, mobile and Vita, 2015. Another mobile Japan-only exclusive, although this one came out on the Vita. In Japan only. It's an online kind of MMO style. It apparently had over 1 million players close to launch, so it was very popular for a while. I haven't played it though, so I don't have any first-hand knowledge. It has a unique character swapping system where you have 2 characters, one angel, one demon, and you're sort of hitting a button to swap out and they each have different weapons and abilities. It's pretty decent looking for a mobile game. It only looks like a Mana game. Otherwise, from what I've understood, this is straight up just a free-to-play action multiplayer game with a Mana paint coat on it. I honestly don't care that we didn't get this. Adventures of Mana, 2016, mobile phones and Vita. This is another remake of Seiken Densetsu 1, although this one is a one-for-one remake. This isn't a reinterpretation or different. This is trying to be a remake. It has a mobile release and Vita as stated, but no physical. If this had a physical release, I would buy it just to have it. I bought it for my phone just to get a little bit of footage, but it kind of plays awkward because touchscreens on a phone. It's very faithful to the original. The art and graphics are, they're pretty okay for a mobile game. The frame rate's very smooth. This soundtrack is criminal that it's on a phone because it's so good. The combat is still simple and straightforward, which is what I like about this and the original. The story isn't really expanded. As said, this is really just a remake, but the translation is a lot better. On the Vita, it feels a lot better to play because of physical buttons. I recommend Vita. If you have one, get this game. It's like $10. Trials of Mana, 2020. Switch, PS4, PC. This is a remake of Seiken Densetsu 3 from the Super Famicom. I love the cel-shaded artwork. Now, technically, I think the PS2 Dawn of Mana has a better art style, and I like that better. But this one, because of the smooth frame rate and the lighting and the cel-shaded, looks really good. It's like low-budget Dragon Quest XI. Sometimes textures and pop-in is a little janky and the shadows are okay, but it's not deal-breaking. The combat and movement is so fluid, especially once you've got tons of skills and you've class changed. On the PC, I was able to play this at 1080p, 120 frames a second, no drops in performance anywhere. The controls are fully remappable. Menus are actually usable, which they were awful in the Famicom one. The remixed soundtrack is amazing. I like it better than the original. There's a quest marker system where it always shows you where to go, and it's a mixed bag. It's nice because sometimes the objectives and what you have to do before you can move on are a little vague, and you, in the original, did a lot of wandering around. But I also don't like being shown exactly where to go and what to do. I think it takes a lot of the atmosphere out of the world, so it kind of makes it feel a little MMO-y. Overall, it doesn't get in the way too much, so I'll give it a pass. It adds a system where there's treasure chests and little collectible pickups in every corner, and you'll be doing a lot of like kind of stealth platforming and wandering around the maps just to look for all the treasure, and really feels good, especially since the platforming works in combat for air attacks and air dodging and stuff. It's kind of cool. Camera, when locked on though, is so bad compared to when not locked on. A few minutes in, I stopped using locked on, and by a few hours in, I forgot I could even lock on, especially if you could zoom the camera out more. Here's my autismo moment. Kind of wish the characters still took off their shoes and let their hair down when they slept like in the original. It's less forgivable with the 3D models as opposed to sprites, but holy shit, the characters actually sleep under the covers. Never mind. 15 out of 10. Game of the year. What games in the Mana series should I absolutely play? If you're a fan of Mana games or action games, all of them. But if you just want to play the best in the series, I think you should play, and in this order, Secret of Mana, Sword of Mana, Legend of Mana, Trials Remake. The collection is also a really, really great way to play the first three, especially if you do want to check out Senken Densetsu. I think that's your best bet for checking out the older ones. For me, the big three of the series are Sword, Trials Remake, and Legend. Legend being overall the best. It's peak Mana. So that's the Mana games. I think these are some of the best games in the action RPG genre. There's some great ones, some okay ones, and some not so great ones. The series started in 1991, so this year being 2020, it's almost 30 years. I'm always going to love the Mana games, and I'm going to keep ignoring the shitty ones.